Welcome to another episode of Lesson Learn and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my friend Scott Osmond. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Thank you.
Scott and I offered a prayer before we started, and just that the Spirit would be here to be able to help Scott share the things that he has prepared, and also to help me ask the right questions to draw out Scott's story, and also for you, our listeners. This is a unique podcast. Scott is, every podcast is unique. Scott's 51. He doesn't look 51. I wish I could have a video podcast when he walked through the home. He's younger than 51. So I think the California lifestyle has been keeping you young, Scott. Scott is gay. Scott's a returned missionary. Scott hasn't been too connected with the church for about 20 years until the stake president of the Long Beach East Stake and a bishop of Scott's ward knocked on his door, and in early January of 2019, and that resulted in Scott speaking in stake conference about his journey as a gay Latter-day Saint. And it was a pretty brave talk you gave, and it was a wonderful chance for what the Long Beach East Stake is doing to potentially be scaled to other stakes. So if you're a local leader or a local member, and you may hear things in this podcast that say, we could do that, and that would help us bring together. I think one of the things President Fersch is talking about is creating Zion. And to create Zion, you have to have all your members feel like they're welcome, and he's really trying to do that. And Scott's nodding his head on the other side.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of this will just be Scott sharing his story, growing up and just his journey and where he's going and what experiences he's had with the church. So is that a fair introduction, Scott?
Yeah, very fair. Yeah, especially the looks good for 51 part. So.
That is awesome. So tell us about your background, where you were raised, Scott.
So I was raised in Sandy, Utah with two older sisters, Linda and Renee, and a family dog named Bubbles. And I have a strong Mormon family background. My mother is Karen Christiansen Osmond, and she immigrated from Denmark with her family after World War II in 1948. And my mother's family came to Utah from Denmark to be closer to the Mormon temple, and my mother's grandfather was the first branch president of their city in northern Denmark, a city called Aalborg. And so I had a very strong Danish influence in my upbringing with her and her sister and her parents, being straight from the motherland. And my father, his name is John Douglas Osmond, is American. And my father's family came from pioneer heritage, and several of his family members also immigrated from Denmark much earlier on before pioneering to Salt Lake City. My father's great-grandfather, named John Lowe Butler, was a bodyguard to Joseph Smith, and apparently not a very good one. So
that's funny.
But in honesty, Joseph Smith told the bodyguards to go home before he was executed to Carthage, Illinois, by angry mobs, or at least that's what my father tells me. So
I believe it.
So we have a very strong, strong roots in the Mormon background, and a lot of really large sacrifices were made by my forefathers to become and remain members of the Mormon Church. In my school background, I attended Mid-Valley Elementary, which is home of the Chipmunks, Union Middle School, home of the Bobcats, graduated from Hillcrest High School, home of the Huskies, in 1985, and I was a graduate of University of Utah, home of the poor people and the Utes. I was very poor, but with a degree in accounting in 1993.
That's great.
Yeah.
They're rebuilding Hillcrest High School. Our office is very close to it, and I see lots of construction over there. I don't know how you feel about your high school being rebuilt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit. I guess everything can be updated, and I'm happy that they're getting such a facelift on it. It's kind of hard to see the old go away, but I don't have a lot of fond memories of high school, as you'll find out. So okay. I'm okay with that.
Maybe that's good.
Yeah. other than the teachers who I loved, actually, a lot of them. Just to wrap off my school background, I also took a community tennis lesson in Sandy City Recreation at age 11. So I just wanted to be thorough. But
Good. Tell us about your work background.
So I moved to Long Beach, California in 1993, and I went to work for a Japanese public accounting firm who hired me out of school. And then I started my own financial accounting consulting business known as Osmond Consulting in 1997, which is thankfully still providing me a sound living. And
you've owned your own company for over 20 years.
Yeah. It's hard to believe when you put it that way, but yeah, I've been very fortunate and blessed, and I've had the opportunity of having clients that have sent me worldwide, all over the world to work, including a 2-year stint in Midtown Manhattan.
That's cool.
And so I was able to maintain my residence in Long Beach while I did all of the traveling. But for about a 10 to 12-year period, I was traveling away from Long Beach for 95% of my time. So it's been a very good experience for me.
Tell us about this family named Osmond. It's a very unknown Mormon name.
Yeah. So my family...
and I'm joking on that, obviously.
are cousins to the famous Osmond family, with Donnie and Marie Osmond. And while we were invited to a few reunions and weddings, our claim was that we were the poor side of the family, which is absolutely true. But I felt often that I was defined by the first 3 things that people generally ask when they first meet me. And as soon as I would say any 2 points of data, I'm from Utah, my last name is Osmond. So the third assumption was that I was Mormon. And any other 2 data points led to the other as well. So it was kind of, it was always kind of difficult for me to, and sometimes still today is still difficult for me to follow it up with, and I'm gay. It doesn't necessarily follow. It sends people for a loop. So yeah,
that's good to know, just your church background. And I just want our listeners to know just how much before Scott and I'm reflecting on our visit before Scott started to speak, just how deeply courageous this is for Scott to share his journey and some of the things he's experienced, and how well prepared he is for this podcast. And so how grateful I am that he's on here. So tell us more about your church experience, Scott.
Sure. So I was lucky enough to serve and complete a Mormon mission in Denmark from 1986 to 1988. And I served various teaching positions in the Mormon Church, including 2.5 years in the bishopric of my singles ward in Holiday, Utah.
That's cool.
And I remained an active member of the church in New York City, singles ward, and in Long Beach, California until 2001.
And just do some quick math for me. If you're 50, and that's roughly 20 years ago. So that was between 30 and 35, you're active. So that's kind of when you stepped away.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did enjoy my church positions, and I enjoyed serving in the church. That was always something that I really felt strongly about, was always a feeling that I got. It made me feel spiritually uplifted to be in the service of my fellow men, and I gained a very strong testimony of that. But unfortunately, my gay background got in the way of being able to.
My gay background got in the way.
The true or the full effect of that spiritual upliftment that most people get. And so, as far as my gay background goes, I As a child, I was a very sensitive boy, and I was a bit of a runt. I was awkward at sports. I liked girly things like being in the kitchen with my mom, and I fed oatmeal to a dolly at an early age.
Thanks for just sharing this and being so honest and just owning it. I think this is great.
I had an apron and a baseball hat that I wore, which was very confusing for my parents. I I was an anomaly. But at age 5, I went to a bus stop to go to school, and I was teased almost immediately by other kids.
Wow.
And they just could pick up on my insecurities. Kids can do that. And I was repeatedly poked at and hit, and kids chanted and spit on me. And I was frequently beat up by neighbor kids, very bullied. My father seemed especially frustrated with me when I came home crying after being beaten and teased by other kids, as I was growing up, and he seemed frustrated that I wasn't fighting back. And so it made me avoid going to my parents about the bullying, because I started to feel guilty for not having the tools to fight back or defend myself. And so I felt the only thing I could really do was just take the abuse.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of things that my family wasn't even aware of. They just knew that I would come home crying a lot, and that I would be a very sad child for a lot of times. I felt very alone in the way I was treated, and that that treatment, for some reason, to me, felt like it was deserved because I was different. And I just tried to be around adults as much as possible to avoid the bullying. But as you mentioned in a talk that I recently gave at a stake conference in the East Long Beach Stake, I spoke about a bus driver who took pity on me and tried to at least give me some reprieve on the bus ride to and from school, which seemed to really speak to people in a way, because it was a way for people to identify maybe just, and for me to kind of compare in my life what being gay meant to me. It meant that I was less than, and that I was deserving of some of this bullying. And I wanted them to, I wanted people to identify just how that felt and how alone that could be. I think most every child has gone through some stage of bullying or somebody saying something mean to them. And so I think my experience really spoke to people, and I was very grateful for the response that I received from the membership at large after that talk. But I was, as a child, I think the term gay was defined for me as someone on TV who liked to cross-dress, and someone who was flamboyant, had swishy hips, wore a purse. That's what I saw on the news. And while I today, have absolutely enormous respect for anybody with the transgender issue, I knew that that was not my situation. I didn't really want to become a girl or have a change in who I was as far as sexual identity goes. I just wanted to be me, without a lot of bullying and a lot of teasing. And so, I think that was often reinforced, those images on TV, by my family, who, made fun of those people. And I immediately knew from a very early age, and from my own religion, that being gay was a horrible thing, and that to be gay was considered to be a sexual perversion. And so, you just wanted to completely avoid any kind of sign of that whatsoever. And it was, not until much later in life that I identified the words sexual orientation, sexuality, and sexual perversion as different things.
Yeah,
for
explain
me,
that for our listeners.
I just found that anything to do with sexuality, whether it was orientation as to who you are, whether you find yourself to be male, female, whether you find sexual orientation or your sexual identity, whether that was transgender or whether that was non-transgender or intersex or whatever conditions there may be, I found that to be all lumped in the same bowl in what I felt like my religion was telling me, and that was, you are who you are, and there is no room for error. You have always been that. You will always be that, and you will never be gay. You will be tempted with things that may be termed as some same-sex orientation or attraction, but it's not a condition. It's just a temptation.
It's helpful. And
so eventually I became familiar much later with those things. But what happened was that, as I spoke of in my talk in the state conference, these things that happened to me within my religion and what they were telling me who I was, and also the bullying in general, where they were creating this monster in my head. And this monster was just telling me that I was non-deserving of happiness, and I was non-deserving of love. And that if anyone showed me love, then I was just incredibly lucky. And I was always very, very grateful that I had my mother, because she loved me very much unconditionally, no matter what, no matter when, all throughout my life. And I believe that's the case also from the rest of my family. But there have been reactions to things that I've done, or where I've been in my lifetime, that have made me feel rejected in certain ways, but never by my mother. And I just want to stress how important that was for me, because without that, there's no way I'd be here today. I just wouldn't. And so,
meaning you would have died by suicide.
Yeah, it was so overwhelming.
If you've got this monster in your head, you can't talk about being bullied. Everything you're hearing about your orientation makes you feel broken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the monster almost in certain ways became my friend. Because it was a way for me to be able to, I always knew it would be there in some really horrible, kind of messed up way. And it was the one consistent thing other than my mother's love. And it was my mother's love that combated that monster in my head. And so, and looking back, I did actually visualize this monster. I don't know if you remember Gossamer on Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes.
No, I don't, but okay. I remember the shows.
Yeah. He was this big, heart-shaped furry monster. His name was Gossamer, and Bugs Bunny, interestingly enough, did his hair and nails on the show. But yeah, I kind of had that kind of feeling that Gossamer, even though he was a monster, was somehow a little bit lovable as well.
I love that.
And kind of fun. But I'll maybe get into that a little bit later as to why that's kind of helpful to know. But I also had some of my most horrible experiences happen within the church walls. And and some of my harshest memories were attending Aaronic priesthood meetings where the teacher who was present just allowed the bullying to take place without any kind of intervention whatsoever.
Wow. Did this even happen in primary? Do you have feelings of primary also being unhealthy for you at times?
Yeah. So back when, back in the day, when I was young, primary was on a Wednesday, and we would go straight from school to primary, and then we were kind of unsupervised on the grounds of the church building before primary started. And so there were times where we would either be in the foyer or waiting for the doors to open to the chapel so we could start the general meeting. And I remember, just before even that happened, they were playing Smear the Queer out on the lawn, and I was typically, the queer. And then getting into the foyer, I remember, having this really horrible interaction with some kids who just absolutely terrified me to no end, and pinned me up against a wall and just were ruthless.
Wow.
And it was mortifying.
I am aware of some of the words you're choosing, and I would honor those words. Terrifying, mortifying.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine what it's like to be, you're 51 and you have better context, but at that age, I think those words are appropriate and helps our listeners to understand how difficult that is, and that we need to do better on bullying. And smear the queer is a phrase that shouldn't exist in our vocabulary in any language, in any part of the world. There's no doctrine that would support what the feelings, what's happening to you. So thanks for sharing some of that.
Thank you. And I recognize that these are things that happened a long time ago. But I don't think I'm the only person that has probably experienced some of this. And it kind of all adds to the feeling that you can't really be fully spiritually fulfilled within church when someone is, or some people, or kids, or the teachers or whatever, are allowing these things to go on. You would hope, me being grown now, you would hope that would never happen again. You would hope that the teacher, would make sure that was a place that you could, where everyone could be spiritually edified, and that there was no, that it was just not a space or a place that for that kind of thing to happen. But it was part of my existence. It was part of my background, and I had later gone to this teacher who ended up being a bishop of our ward when I got back from my mission. And I asked him why he allowed that to happen, because I was really kind of trying to understand it better. I was trying to forgive, and I wanted to forgive. I wanted to let all of that go. And what I really wanted him to say was, "I'm sorry." And instead, he had no apologies for it. And he said that he did it to toughen me up, and that I really needed to just, buck up. And here I am, and today, and, I made it through it, and I'm a stronger person for it. And he was trying to show why his methods were justified. And I never really got that closure on that experience for me. I feel that today it's a learning experience and not something I hold on to so much. But and there are other experiences that I feel were just as horrifying, to be honest. But I just use that as an example to be able to help people understand when you are already being minimalized, when you already feel broken, and and then an adult decides not to take action, it reinforces that position so much stronger, because it tells you that you're not even worth that person's time to get involved. and be protected. And so it was a really horrible experience for me.
Just a comment there. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think we are strong enough as a church. And if any of our listeners don't know me, I'm a fully believing member, support and sustain our church. But my confidence in our church helps me to be able to look inward and say, what can we do better? So I'm fine hearing this story. I think it's part of becoming the body of Christ we need to be. And I look at the world is so hard right now, and it's so difficult that church has to be the balm of Gilead. It has to be a place of healing for a primary age kid to a 99-year-old. Everybody needs to feel peace and hope and healing. And a bowling experience is not obviously part of that. And one of the things that Scott and I talked about before we went live is a feeling that Scott has come recently to Scott after listening to a podcast by Kate Toronto, that Scott probably has PTSD.
Yeah.
And so Scott may talk, I think Scott will talk about that. We'll come back to the end of the podcast, but just, keep this experience Scott just shared in the back of your mind, listeners, because I think it'll sort of paint a little bit of what's one of the things Scott's come to learn is that this has resulted in PTSD for him regarding his journey with the church. And even though he loves the church at some level, and it's also had enough of these difficult experiences that it's resulted in real life PTSD for Scott. So just hold that in your brains as Scott's sharing his story.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inserting that. So yeah, each instance really just kind of made that monster more powerful for me. And the way I thought I was going to get around this was I thought I just needed to be the best little boy in the world. I just needed to try harder. And that with each blow, if I were a little more faithful, if I was a little bit better, if I didn't tease my sisters, if I didn't, and that was never going to happen. I teased them all the time, but maybe that was, reverse bullying in some cases. If you ask them, I don't know. I'm sure they would agree to that, but they were older, they could take it. But I did feel that, that if I was able to control everything I did and be the perfect little kid, then God would somehow bless and protect me from all of this torment that I was going through. And so I also felt guilty for having any kind of sexual thoughts going through my head, because I was convinced that this was because I was not maintaining a clean kind of mind, and that I wasn't exercising my faith, and that I was weak spiritually. And so I studied pamphlets written by Boyd K. Packer and all kind of information that I could get my hands on regarding sexuality from the church. I know many of your podcasts have mentioned prior publications, including The Miracle of Forgiveness and others, that have been, they have also experienced a very damaging effect from some of these publications. And I think that one thing we can all agree on, no matter who you are, if you are a person who has any kind of LGBTQ experience within the Mormon Church, you are probably more well-versed and more well-read than any person in the Mormon Church by age 14. And that you are clinging to every word, and you are probably highlighting every word in your mind and trying to create some kind of cross references, and some of that stuff is so cryptic that you don't even know what it is. You just know that you're a horrible person for it. And so it's really I think that is, to strengthen your point, I think that is something that creates a lot of PTSD for a lot of people going through the LGBTQ experience. And so I felt like the sin was just sometimes overwhelming, and that it was just not, my faith was just lacking. And so in my adult years, I went into my mission, and I grew much closer to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I have absolutely no regrets in serving my mission. I am thankful for my mission to no end. I would never do it again, but I am thankful for it. And it taught me so much, just to be selfless in the service of other people, and how important that is in my life in general, and to feel joy from that. And so before I went on my mission, I was about 16, and I'd asked my parents at one point if I could maybe get therapy. I was very depressed as a kid, and I just didn't really know what to do. When I had heard about this therapy and, saw it on TV, and I just thought, maybe this could be something that could help me.
Was it conversion therapy or just general therapy for depression?
I was just thinking general therapy. Okay. Yeah. And my father told me that I should just go on a mission, and that would be my best therapy, which was kind of rich, because he went on a mission to the Los Angeles, Southern California region. And, he has all kinds of stories about, people not being there for the right reasons and stuff. So it was, but I kind of understood what he was saying. I think it was more that we didn't really have the money or the financial resources for therapy. Uh-huh. I think he kind of viewed it that way too. And I would probably agree with that. But I just felt like, because of all of this stuff going into it, that I felt like my mission was going to be my cure. I was 100% certain that was going to be my cure. And that was going to be the place where I could be the best little boy in the world. I could be, 24/7 a missionary, and I could be working on just, serving the Lord. It really was my last hope. And so 1 year into my mission, I realized that I had only 1 year left. And it wasn't just a sudden thing. It was a build. And I went through this kind of mental breakdown, and I didn't really even know what it was. And I just ended up in the hospital, and I just was not able to breathe. And I just had a horrible anxiety attack. And I was there for a few days, and I just realized that I was nowhere near the cure. I thought, if I've 1 year into this and I'm still feeling the way I feel, in fact, my feelings of being gay were stronger than ever, more frustrating than ever. And I just didn't know what to do with it. And I thought that really, I don't have a lot of hope that this mission is going to actually do what I thought it was going to do, which, was really my main goal. And so I was seeing myself as a failure, because not only Denmark was the lowest baptizing mission in the world. And, nobody there wants to hear about religion, or at least in that time period, they just didn't. I think
it's a pretty hard mission too. Still, you're right.
Yeah. It was very difficult to get people to open up about religion. So there wasn't a lot of success on that front. And if I couldn't fix myself, then why was I there? What was it that I was doing wrong? Was my faith still lacking? It had to be me. It couldn't be anything the church was teaching. It couldn't be anything about, sexual orientation not being changeable. It had to be me. And so what was I doing that was such a lack of faith? And,
I wish I could go back. A lot of our listeners wish they could go back and just give you a big hug on your mission at 1 year in Denmark, and hear you, just that's a really tough spot to be in. And just to think that everything you're feeling is your fault. And I can certainly connect the dots in my mind why, after a year, um, a lot of missionaries after a year are looking forward to the future. They realize they've got a year under the belt, a year left, and all their hopes and dreams are intact, but you're having to face what you'd hoped would change isn't changing, and your orientation's hardwired into you. And I think as we're recording this podcast in 2019, we understand that, but you're back in, this is 20 plus years ago. And it's just a really tough spot to be in. And I wish we could have done better. I wish we, could have seen better. Society was certainly making these assumptions, but some would say, I wish our church leaders weren't making the same assumptions and we had kind of gotten ahead of the curve here and lifted your burden back there. And I don't know how to reconcile that. I just recognize, and so my reaction is not necessarily, is to honor your pain. I think that's the best thing I do as a committed Latter saint, is not dismiss your pain, to sort of keep everything cognitively safe for me. I think my responsibility is to hear your story and validate all the pain and recognize what a difficult spot you're in. Because that's the only way I think we can help heal each other, is to validate people's stories and to hear their pain. And that's a really tough spot. And so it makes sense to me. A mental breakdown to me isn't a sign of weakness, Scott. It's a sign of the reality of your situation. And it's like a box that just keeps closing in. There's no sides, and the sides just keep closing in. And so anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And when you say honor your pain, it resonates with me, because what you're really talking about is actively listening to my story and identifying with it in a way that can't be done topically. And when you have these podcasts with other people, what you're really doing is you're getting people to actively listen to that pain and to those struggles. And by doing that, it really is the only way I'm familiar with, especially recently, that wounds that you don't even know exist can sometimes heal, and they can become soothed, and they become a balm for those wounds that go really deep. But I resonate with that a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, so keep telling us about your mission president. I don't know if you came out to him or her, if they were helpful, or how you navigated that.
I loved my mission president and his wife. They were so dear to me through this whole 1 year in type of thing, where I didn't know what I was going to do, and they never did come out to them. Even though they had a son themselves that was gay. I don't think I was aware of that at the time, but I was not comfortable telling them that, and they just knew that I was horribly conflicted, and that I was struggling, and they wanted to do everything they could to help me fulfill my mission, because it was so important to me. I knew I was, grasping at some things that I was grasping with some things that and struggling, but I didn't want to go under. I didn't want to go home. That was the last thing I wanted to do, because then I would have been a failure. I know that I would have viewed myself as beyond help if I didn't get to the very finish line. And so they were so kind and loving in helping me get there. And taking me under their wing from time to time to just say, it's okay. If you need to cry, just cry. And so it was, a lot of my pain and anguish was masked under other things that were happening around me. But the root of it was always that, here I am, I'm gay, and I don't even know what to do with this. It's not getting better. And so I fell into a pretty deep depression after my mission, and my mission president gave me a blessing before I left back home again, and he said something very specific, and he had told me to. I expected him to say, date and get married and everything as soon as you can or whatever, I don't know. And instead, he paused and he said, just wait and take your time. And I know that he was really speaking from the Spirit when he gave me that blessing. And it gave me some kind of comfort in knowing that someone else understood that I needed time to deal with this and reconcile this, whatever was going on. And so, yeah, I tried to start dating women and romantic relationships in my singles ward and elsewhere. And I was feeling every time like I was playing with someone's feelings and that I was doing something that was unfair to them. And excuse me, I just felt I felt like it wasn't for me to put them through this. That while I dated some really just incredible women who were very kind and loving, they deserved to be loved in every way. And I couldn't love them in every way. I could love them as a friend. I could love them and appreciate them for who they were, but I couldn't love them as a husband and as someone that they deserved. And so I was continuously conflicted with that because I just knew that I would never find anybody as long as I felt the way I did. And it made me sick to my stomach just thinking about it and dating these people and continuing relationships, knowing full well that this was just not going to happen and that I was kind of trying to be in this kind of guinea pig situation for my own spiritual well-being, which just, it didn't feel right to me. And so I teamed that up with some temple experiences that I had where it was just so negative for me. The temple was a place where I was hoping that I would feel the love of God in a profound way. And by the time I got to the celestial room, I had the monster in my head telling me, you don't belong here. You're not worthy.
Wow.
Don't kid yourself.
Wow.
And it made me terribly emotional because this was supposed to be where I would feel God's presence and love. And I felt none of it. I felt the love of my family and the support of my family, but I didn't feel God's love. I felt conflict, and I felt like I just wanted to leave and get out of there as soon as I could. That was also teamed up with a really unfair experience with a stake president of mine who sent me on my mission, who was very new to his position. I believe in my mind that he saw me as less than. And he told me that I needed to commit to covenants in his office that were just as holy as any covenant that I was making in the temple. That I would not do certain things anymore. he was harsh. He had kind of this Southern accent that, every time he said son, it felt like he was piercing my heart. And it was a lot to take on. Throughout my mission, throughout my temple experiences, I heard this voice. He had convinced his high councilman to yell amen at the end of every meeting and every talk. It was very militant. It wasn't what I needed in my life. I needed to feel love. I needed to feel understanding. I needed to feel somebody like you, somebody like President Fersch. And so I'm not sure why I didn't become bitter towards the church, because I think I had a lot of reasons to. I feel like I had a lot of experiences to say, you know what, that bad far outweighed the good. But I attribute it again to my mother, who really did teach me unconditional love, and that good people can do bad things. And that it was important for us to forgive. And so I really think that was, one of the reasons why I didn't turn completely bitter towards the church. And that I was able to, at some point, just say, well, the church isn't perfect, people aren't perfect, and that, my experiences can somehow, I can move on from those. So I feel like there was a lot of...
I'm in the celestial room with you, Scott, right now, and I'm thinking quite a bit about that. You did a great job of articulating that, and I think 5 years ago I would have, before I talked to more stories, I probably would have tried to reconcile that and maybe even suggest you shouldn't feel that way, and I would never do that now. I sat in the celestial room yesterday. I had a great experience there, so it's easy for me to say, Scott, you should have had a great experience there. But the thought that comes to my mind is that's on us. That's on the bullying you felt. It's on the narrative that who you are is a mistake. It's that you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough to make more deals with God, to be more righteous, and that's on us. And I think it's on us. And I say that is just the institutional side of the church and the members, and we created this monster in your head that allowed you to have the kind of experience that you were deserving to have had. Scott, you just served 2 years. You gave 2 years of your life to serve the people of Denmark. You've been doing everything you know how to be. There doesn't seem like there's a lot of rebellion in you. There seems like everything you've been doing is to try to do the right thing. And so I just think that's on us. I believe that God would have wanted you to have the kind of experience that I felt yesterday as I was in the celestial room. You're just as worthy as I was. I am, whatever. I'm mixing up my experience yesterday with your experience. And I would think God would have wanted you to felt that, but you just weren't able to.
I wasn't.
And that's not because of you, that's on us. And so I think we just have to look inward and say, how are we going to heal people like you? And how are we going to improve so that church is the balm of Gilead? And how can we take your experience and learn from it, not be activated by it, not think this is a attack on our church, but a chance to look inward by you bravely sharing your story and what President Fersch is doing by including you, that's helping us grow. So that's a pretty inflected, that's a pretty interesting part of your story for me as a celestial room and that experience. And I admire you not being bitter. It would be very logical to just be bitter forever about the experiences you felt in the church. And it's interesting that the love of your mom is one of the big differences there. Just somebody that loved you. So keep sharing.
I appreciate you respecting my feelings, and I recognize that those those words would be hard for a lot of members to hear, and hard for them to understand even. But I just felt like I needed to deliver the context before maybe your listeners could understand why.
Good.
And I think that I think that generally speaking, what you're saying is absolutely right. That I do believe there are ways that we can get there together, and that we can help people through these kinds of experiences. And I think, again, active listening is key, and respect for the person's experience. And for the person who's experienced to learn how to respectfully deliver the experience, so that it's not a criticism to the person they're talking to, but it's a review of what they've been through.
And I was just going to mention, but I probably can't find it very quickly, is an article published by Ian Koch, who's an LGBTQ ally in Atlanta. LDS Living just published an article, and he talks about the importance of listening, and he's listened to hundreds of LGBTQ stories, and he talks about the very things you share. So yeah, keep sharing your story. Looks like you went to church social services.
I did. So I resigned myself to LDS social services after my mission, and after going through these experiences of trying to date women. And they had eventually referred me to a psychiatrist who they worked with, who turned out was a reparative therapist. And I 100% trusted that process, not realizing that process was horribly broken. And for several years, I was being told to have these kind of sexually driven tests with women who I dated, and that I was told that I placed women on a pedestal, and that I was depressed because I wasn't giving women, putting women in their rightful place in my life. And so he placed me on a myriad of drugs for depression and anxiety, and at one time I was on 6 medications at the same time, and they were constantly being adjusted up and down. And at the same time, I was still going to the University of Utah trying to continue my studies, and my head was just constantly in the clouds. I didn't know whether I was coming and going. And I just trusted this process would somehow make me better, somehow resign me to helping me. Again, the mission didn't work, and praying didn't work, and fasting didn't work, but, professional help, that will work. That's my last chance. And I guess what happened was that throughout my past experiences of being gay, I've been told so many things as to why I'm gay, that it is due to sexual perversion, it's due to masturbation, lack of faith, fast and pray that gay away, or it's because I'm selfish, or because there's a lack of a strong father figure, or there are effects of, a over-loving mother, or that I'm not gay, I'm just SSA, and it just felt like somebody was throwing darts at a dartboard just to see which one would stick. The idea that this was all caused from something other than just me being who I am was never really brought to light until just even recently within the Mormon Church, and I had to find that eventually on my own. And so I did happen to see recently that there was this amazing website on churchofjesuschrist.org, where they have really updated their approach and their understanding to sexual orientation. And I think that's the wonderful thing about, what we're talking about today, is that there has been enlightenment. No doubt there has been enlightenment. and they recognize that sexual orientation and sexual identity does not change, and that we shouldn't expect it and we shouldn't require it. It's a big step.
Yeah, well, it's a huge step. When I look at what you went through before we got to that stage, that's such a big difference.
It is.
It's a huge difference.
It is. And I feel, in some ways, I feel a lot of hope from that recognition, because I do see growth and I see understanding. I think that, I think that the membership at large is growing in understanding. And I think that they recognize that there have been these duplicitous meanings, and the way even that certain policies, church policies, were in the past, they were interpreted differently based on who was the leader at the time, their stake president, their bishop, whoever, their priesthood counselor, and the timing of it. I mean, going from, just get married, and everything will fix itself, all the way up to what is now the policy of today, is to, not encourage that sexual orientation will change based on, and that the feelings will decrease based on that marriage. So there has been some definite growth there. And so yes, I feel like it's going to take time for these new approaches to get distributed to the membership at large, because right now I'm really I'm seeing this within the leadership counseling services, but I'm not seeing it directly stated within the general membership websites. And so I'm hoping that will get dispersed eventually to the rest of the membership, so it's so clear, because it couldn't be clearer on the leadership website as to how to counsel, or how they can counsel people with same-sex attraction or differences with sexual orientation or identity. And I'm sure that you, being a bishop, you've seen those differences and those changes being pretty dramatic as well.
Yeah, but I agree that it's even when I first started to meet with a couple of gay men in my ward, Scott, I didn't understand all the things the church was teaching. I think sometimes we can improve as an institution of a church to talk about things that we no longer teach. We sometimes don't do that. We just talk about, how it is today, but we don't sort of dispel past teachings. And I think we can mature as an institution to church to do that. And I think it would heal a lot of people to say, we recognize that what we've taught in the past has caused people pain. And we recognize that we've not been perfect in the past. And Elder Uchtdorf can do that. To me, that doesn't mean I don't believe in our past leaders and our prophets or sustain them. I think it's part of just institutional maturity to be able to say that it is the restored church, but institutionally, we sometimes don't match our doctrine. And so I think we could heal people if we acknowledge that. And I hope,
absolutely,
as our church matures, we're able to do better with both of those.
I totally agree. And the one thing I'd like to add to that as well is that I think that it's not enough to just say, I'm going to throw out my miracle of forgiveness and, just so it doesn't cause any anguish. Those materials still exist somewhere. They exist in grandparents' homes. And believe you me, if there is an article or something that someone who's LGBTQ that they can study and read, they will get their hands on it to try and put more meaning into what it means for them. So I don't think that these past policies or understandings should be glossed over. I think they should be recognized as being part of our past, and I think they should be addressed so that kids understand, and especially youth understand, that these are things that happened in the past but are not currently what is taught. And they may hear it, they may read it, but we don't do that today. And I think that's really important.
I agree.
But I do appreciate your past mention of things like the miracle of forgiveness and the timing of it, and why it was maybe appropriate for the time and things like that. I understand, trying to bring that in, but I just wanted to say I think those materials will be around for a very, very long time, and so they can be dangerous in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had miracle forgiveness in my office as a YSA bishop, and it wasn't until some LGBTQ people pointed out to me some of the content in that book it wasn't what we taught today.
Yeah.
and damaging, that I recognized, wow, there may be some things that I liked in there, but I think that's a good example of where I just didn't understand how something I could give to somebody could actually add to their burden.
Sure.
And so I think, that's very helpful.
Well, so I just wanted to also bring up, when we're talking about the past, how something was very important in my past, which was in California, we had Proposition 22 in the year 2000. And the Proposition 22 was the Defense of Marriage Act. It was essentially a precursor to Proposition 8, which was the gay marriage proposition in California that the Mormon Church got heavily involved with on a political level. And the reaction in my local ward for Proposition 22 was very difficult. And the reason was because we had multiple people who were still actively attending our ward who were openly gay, including a couple who were partnered and obviously couldn't marry, but they were living together, and they were very much a couple. And we felt together that there was a change that happened within the general membership, where we were, really accepted, and people seemed to really enjoy us. It was almost kind of this progressive type of feeling that, if you're gay, you can come here and you'll be welcomed. But after Proposition 22, it felt more like that changed. And whether that was perceived or it was actual, I think either way, I don't think it was totally just us perceiving it that way. I think that there was a general change coming down from the pulpit, saying that they needed to support Proposition 22 with any ways or means that they could. And so I found that to be a really tough thing to do, to maintain and sustain my membership within the Mormon Church at that point. And we, at the same time, for about a little over, I'd say 3 years, there was a group that was meeting in the LA Stake. And it was hosted by Howard Anderson, who was the stake president and at the time, and it was called simply the Third Friday of the Month group. And what he did was he said, well, I don't really know who these people are. I have a lot of them in my stake, LGBTQ people. I'm going to invite them to the Relief Society room every third Friday of the month, and we're going to have a little fireside, and I'm going to get to know them. And I remember going to the first few meetings, and he was this very large guy, just such a great guy, huge stature, very popular within, his community at large, because he was, well, first of all, he was just very well off. He owned all these radio stations, but he had a large voice. He had a large stature, and he was a fun guy, but he was also reserved in a way. And, he would sit there in front of the meetings, and his arms would be crossed, and he would just kind of sit there and wouldn't say a word. He opened the meeting. We closed the meeting. We had, somebody, a guest speaker. We talked about our experiences, much like you do with your podcasts, and have some kind of spiritual enrichment from it. We had the most amazing music you have ever heard in that room. The spirit was so strong, it was palatable, and anyone who visited could feel it. And it was an amazing thing. We had church leaders that were visiting as well. And so over the course of several months, he started to uncross his arms, and he started to talk to us more and to open up. And he started joking and, talking about the gays, and he would laugh, and he, just had kind of this feeling like, yeah, he's starting to really get to know us. He enjoys it. And he had fun with it. We had fun with it. There's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt associated with LGBTQ issues. And those of us who have survived it, I think have done so in a lot of ways by using humor to get around it and to get through the pain. And I think he enjoyed being around us. And so, yeah, he was told several times by church authorities in Salt Lake that he needed to close it down. And he shared that with us. And he said that he wasn't going to close it down, because when he asked them, are you telling me that I'm not responsible for the spiritual well-being of these souls in my stake? And they said no. He said, well, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to get to understand their issues. He actively listened to those people, and it made a difference. And he changed. He physically changed from the outset. We could see he physically changed and how he understood our issues. It's so important. Active listening is just so important. And so he was removed from stake presidency. They brought in a new stake president. They tried to close it down at that point. He got special permission. He was good friends with the new stake president. And he got special permission from that stake president to continue the meetings, which they weren't very happy about. And we did that for another 6 months to a year before church LDS Social Services came in and said that they were holding our last meeting and that this was going to be under the auspices of the LDS Social Services rather than at the stake level, because there were so many people attending from other stakes. And they didn't feel like, since he didn't have jurisdiction over those stakes, that was going to be handled differently. That was around 2001, and they took our names and addresses, email addresses, and they never contacted us again.
Wow.
We were all, we probably had close to 200 people attending those meetings, and in total. So it was a very hard thing for us as a group, because we felt like we were just discarded. And so it left a lot of wounds, and it left a lot of people bitter at the end, unfortunately. And so what I did personally after that happened was I had decided that I needed to find some outside support, that I could no longer rely on the church to give me my spiritual fulfillment, and that this going to church every week felt like I was batting my head against the door, and I was just getting a bloody head over this. I couldn't walk away without feeling like somebody had just made me feel worse than when I walked in. And so I found some therapists who helped me understand the importance of distancing myself from painful feelings and memories rather than live them in my day-to-day life. And that's why when you mentioned Cape Toronto's podcast 132, highly recommend it. Absolutely. If you don't even listen to my podcast, please listen to hers. It's so important, and it's so integral to the community at large, for both Mormons, the Mormon community, as well as the LGBTQ community. But According to that recent study she had quoted at the University of Georgia, more than 70% of the LGBT Mormons surveyed met criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the sermons and teachings they heard at church. So those triggers are real and powerful, as we've discussed, and it can't be understated, I don't think, as to the complexity and the severity of what people feel when they go into a Mormon church. In fact, there was a gentleman who was in my group in my ward who came to hear me speak at state conference, and I looked at him while I gave my talk, and my heart went out to him because I could see the emotion, just absolutely terrified, just as I was. And, I have so much respect for him because I don't know if I could have done the same thing for him. These people take risks just by showing up. The pain is real. And so we really just need to honor that, like you say, and to not minimize it and to understand it so that we can help them heal, as myself.
I did find the title of this LDS listening article that just came out today. Do we dismiss what causes others pain? So well said, Scott.
Thank you. So I found support for searching for my friends to replace my religion. And I found sporting groups like this incredibly supportive swim team. It's called the Long Beach Grunions. It's a gay swim team, but we have gay and straight members on it. And they help me support a positive body image and inner strength. I have a running group that sometimes I feel saved me so many times because I remember I was teaching a speed training class, and right before a marathon, we went around in a circle and I asked everyone to say one thing that would, that they felt like was helpful from our speed training classes. And this one lady said, what running did for them. I wanted to hear what running does for them. And this one lady said, it makes me feel human again.
Wow.
Sorry. Wish I could do this without so many tears, but I felt so strongly about what she just said there, because there was something about me being able to run and have that strength and to prove to myself that there was something I had control over that made me feel human again. And I would just hope that anyone who is suffering from depression or from lack of self-worth, no matter what your issues are, no matter what, that they can find something in their life that makes them feel human again, that makes them feel in control, that makes them feel powerful. Because it's so important in the healing process. It's so important for you to be able to say, I can do this part. I'm okay when I'm doing this. There's such great comfort in that. And that's what I found from these sporting groups. So it was important for me to have that, because I literally felt like I had cut off my arms to leave that church. I did not want to go. I didn't want to leave the music. I didn't want to leave some of the people that I felt were strongly against us leaving, but yet, weren't part of the majority. I just didn't want to leave. I felt like I was leaving my heritage. I felt like I was leaving my grandparents who sacrificed so much to leave Denmark. To be closer to the church, I felt like I was disappointing my own family. But it was something I had to do to save myself. I didn't really understand it all the way when I did it, but I knew it had to happen. And eventually, through these other groups, I found a way to make my arms grow back. And they didn't grow back in the same way. They grew back in different ways, but they were stronger. And I knew that I would be able to rely on these new arms for the rest of my life if I needed to. And that was a great feeling for me to feel.
I just love that visual of you having to cut off your arms to free yourself from the snare. I'm thinking, I think his name's Adam Ralston or Aaron Ralston, who cut off his arm when that boulder trapped him to live. And I'm thinking we understand what he had to do and the courage that took to hack off. I read that book and heard him break his bones to, it was just very graphic and very courageous, and it allowed him to live.
Yeah.
And I think of the boulder, and the boulder to me is, Adam didn't do anything wrong. That boulder just came down and you didn't do anything wrong here. You just had this incredible boulder trap both of your arms in this snare. And I kind of frame that boulder up as just the limitations of our institutional church and the pain it created to you and our inability to meet your spiritual needs. And I think that's just, we need to learn to be able to just say that and identify that and not feel like, it doesn't make me an activist saying I'm against the church or this is the way we solve it going forward. It just acknowledges the pain and the boulder that's slammed on your arms, and you've done everything you can to avoid the boulder. It's not a boulder you manufactured. You didn't even go climbing like Adam did and put yourself in risk in that slot canyon that he was trapped in. You were doing everything you can to be safe. And so there's some differences in that analogy, but I love the way your arms grew back differently. It's a really powerful analogy, Scott.
Thank you. It felt literal at the time.
And it's not a sign of weakness. I don't think you stepped away because you were weak. I think you stepped away because you were strong. And you just knew that you couldn't find your spiritual needs met here, and it would often add to your trauma. It's just the reality of the situation.
I see that when you say that now. At the time, I felt incredibly weak. And I wished I could have seen it. And I wished I could have known you and heard that perspective of it, because I really did feel weak. And I did feel like their other part of it was that Howard Anderson was very strong in telling us every week or every month that we met, please keep going to church. They can't ignore you if you aren't going, if you're there, they can't ignore you. And he was right. They can't. But it's hard to do when you're struggling with your own well-being,
right,
just to prove that you're not going away. And
someone else has told me about Howard Anderson in a lunch. It wasn't a podcast, but somebody else told me how much they love the Stake President and what he did. He was part of that group, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He just was really, truly amazing. And the only two rules that we had in those meetings was no gay bashing and no church bashing. And that's all we really needed. And it enforced respect on both sides. It was really important. It was really groundbreaking for me. And I guess, yeah, I guess fast forwarding to the current year then, where as I continued on my journey, I felt like I had found, if anything spoke to me spiritually as true, I adopted it, and I kind of took that in. And it did give me a little bit of freedom to say, well, I'm going to investigate Buddhism. I'm going to investigate some other maybe things that kind of ring true to me, and meditation really rang true to me. And there were things that really soothed me. And I'm grateful, actually, that happened. I would have never believed that leaving it, but I was actually very grateful for what I was able to learn along the way in those 20 years as to how strong I was actually in myself and how much credit I could give myself. But there was still kind of these open wounds for me. and these question marks that I had. And I knew that I couldn't stay active in the Mormon Church, but I knew that I could leave my records in the Mormon Church. And that was my way of being able to honor Howard Anderson and say, you're not getting rid of me that easy. I'm going to be on those rolls, and you're going to see my name every time, and you're going to have to be reminded why I don't go. And it wasn't in a vindictive way. It was just in a way to be able to say, remember me. Remember my experience. Because someday it may be really helpful. I don't know, but I hope it is. And when missionaries would come to visit me every once in a while, I'd have them for dinner. I'd tell them my story. I'd tell them why I didn't go. And I'd tell them they were welcome anytime they wanted. But it was a way for me to be able to share my story and to teach. Just like when I was a missionary, it's just a different a different lesson that I was teaching. And I tried to teach it with the Spirit. So in January of this year, President Emerson Fersch, the stake president, and my prior bishop, who was still bishop when I was attending.
What's his name?
His name is...
now I've stumped you.
Yeah. Oh.
It'll come to you. So President Fersch and your prior bishop knock on your door.
Yeah.
Do they call in advance? Do they text you saying they're coming, or do they just...
Bishop Perry. Sorry.
I knew it'd come to you.
Yeah. They had knocked on my door out of the blue at 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
Wow. Bishops and stake presidents are supposed to be at church on...
They sure are.
That's fascinating to me that it was a Sunday morning.
Yeah. I thought
it's not 7:30 when this is right during the meeting block.
It could only mean one thing for me, that the church has done something again, because I had read the 2015 policy change that they had made on gays. And I thought, oh, they're here to excommunicate me. It must be.
I agree.
And
that would be a very logical conclusion.
So they wanted to speak to me, and they were very persistent. And I kept saying, no, I think I need to, I'm in a hurry. I need to go. And I was actually trying to get to a swim. But yeah, they convinced me to let them into my building. And so
this was just like over the speaker. They weren't even... I'm visualizing a face-to-face conversation at a doorstep. This is over a speaker.
Yeah.
So you can't even see these guys, and they want to come talk to you in your place.
Yeah. I had, no idea who President Fersch was. I've never met him. And he has a very interesting background in of his own. He was not a member of the church up until about 15 years ago. He's very open about his story of being an alcoholic and finding God and converting to Mormonism, and now he's a stake president. He has a very unique perspective based on his history, and he shared with me that morning some of his history, and so he spoke to me and said that they just wanted to invite me to a stake conference. They didn't know where I was as far as the Mormon Church goes, but they were where I was in my current standing, but that they wanted to invite me to the stake conference. It was a special stake conference. They're reaching out to LGBTQ people. They're having a gay person who's going to be speaking about his experiences being a gay man in the Mormon Church. And he wanted me to know that they were trying to reach out to others within our stake. And he looked at me straight in the eye, and he said he loved me, and he said he's sorry. And he said some other things that I don't want to share because they're very personal, but they were things I really needed to hear because I've been waiting most of my life to hear them. And so I had no idea the depth of these wounds that I still had. But the fact that this man decided to come and visit me personally and tell me these things, and he was highly emotional when he did it. You cannot not listen to that. You can't refuse that feeling. And he is very non-traditional. I think most people would say, let's hold another meeting. How are we going to do this? 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday. At best. But to actually go and be part of that person's life in that person's space, and to get in there and say, no, we're going to get in there and we're going to talk to him. We're going to tell him we love him. We're going to tell him that he matters and that we're sorry. I can't explain to you what that does to me, what that did to me. Now, maybe not everybody would take it that same way, but I did. He took a chance. And so I just want to say that, and not only that, he followed up. I wasn't able to attend the state conference. I had a prior engagement. But I told him I wanted to talk to him and speak with him again. He wanted me to come to his office and told me he would set up an appointment. Eventually we did. We had a 3-hour meeting where I spoke about my truth, my experiences, my past. He actively listened to all of it, invited this other gentleman, Mike Secrist, who spoke in the state conference and came out as well. And it was a chance for me to really explain what I had been through and to help have him have a basis for everything he said. And now, after listening to me and ranting on about my past and everything that I have been through, which I did very respectfully, but after having him do that, there is nothing this man can't tell me or say to me that I will not respect. Nothing. And I just can't explain enough how important it is. Active listening, active listening, active listening. It's an absolute must for anyone to understand anyone's pain. And it's a lesson for me as well to help anyone else with pain, regardless of where it comes from. I think it's a must. And the more we actively listen, the better chance we have of actually helping those people through their pain. It doesn't take it away, but it helps them through it. It helps them understand and feel loved. It's really important. I think it's part of our commitment as followers of Christ that we take that commitment seriously, that we really use that commitment to make sure that we help people along the way. And I hope I never neglect that when I am offered that kind of an opportunity, because I feel so lucky to have had those two men come to me and take time out of their schedule for me. I didn't feel like I was worthy of that kind of time. I didn't feel like I was even worthy of that kind of apology, but it was really amazing. It was a life changer for me. It forever will be.
I'm just so touched. I think a lot of our listeners had tears in their eyes, and what President Fersch did in some ways isn't very complicated.
No.
In some ways, I love this story because we could all do what Bishop Perry and President Fersch did. And I love the symbolic. It was on a Sunday morning when they should be in meetings, and we're really good at meetings in church and talking about sort of how to minister people. But he just said, we're out of here. We're going to do this. We're leaving the building. We're going to go find Scott. And then what he did in that visit with you and your love for him. It's just I had a chance to go to that stake conference and hear Michael Secrist speak in that Saturday night session as he gave a great talk coming out to his congregation, and the line of people wanting to meet him after it just went on and on and on. And I could just tell. And I realized that, I can talk to President Fersch if I'm a member of his stake, no matter what's going on in my life. Yeah, if I'm LGBTQ, I can talk to him. But if I have anything going on in my life, and I think the same with his bishops, they are safe. I know because he's extending love to LGBTQ, the message that sends to everybody about, and his mantra is creating Zion. He asked me to speak in the Sunday session of Stake Conference, and
I'm so sorry I missed that.
Well, I sent him a talk. I wanted to make sure that I was aligning with him, and he said, it's not bold enough. And I think what he was wanting to do is to teach that we grow through being uncomfortable at times. And certainly listening to the gay men in my YSA ward made me uncomfortable because I recognized their journey and I recognized limitations in my thinking and the institutional church to meet their needs. So he wanted me to be bolder, it's not being critical of the church. It's not saying this is how we do it better, but I think we grow through being uncomfortable. And some of this podcast may make some of our listeners uncomfortable. And I think that's okay, because I think we do grow through being uncomfortable, and it helps us know how to do better. So this is an incredible experience you're having with President Fersch and what he's doing. So just go back and keep telling your story.
Well, I think what's remarkable as well is that President Fersch wasn't even around when any of this was going on, yet he still felt the responsibility to apologize. I think that's remarkable.
It's interesting. It's very perceptive.
I think that being able to, hear those words was based on his position was just really important for me to just hear that, and I think that sometimes we don't even have to be directly responsible for things that go wrong. We can say that we're sorry for the things that have happened to anybody in the past, just by saying, not only am I sorry, I'm going to commit to doing something to change it. I'm going to commit to doing something that makes it better. And that's exactly what he did. So after we spoke for a while and I talked to him about why it wasn't possible for me really to even allow myself to attend church anymore after the 2015 policy change, because I felt like I couldn't be in church without hearing something mentioned about that policy. And I would have to somehow vocalize that was not appropriate. I felt like it went against the second article of faith, where we don't baptize children of gay people, but yet we don't have similar policies for those of murderers and rapists and even child molesters. That we were singling out this group, and that it was a very, very biased policy, and that I couldn't agree to it because I felt the need to be able to speak about it. And I did tell that to President Emerson at the time. That policy had not yet been reversed at that point. And also the missionaries who, would visit me as well. When they would invite me to church, I'd say, yes, well, I don't think you're ready for me. If that were to happen, I would have to vocalize some kind of a dissent. There was just something in me that it wasn't true. And I couldn't just sit there and hear it. And so I didn't want to be disrespectful, and I didn't want to put myself or anyone else in a disrespectful kind of position. I just felt like I would have to somehow answer to that. So he did listen to everything I had to say, and I told him that my biggest concern, it remains my biggest concern to this day, is the youth suicide rates, the increase, and not just within the Mormon Church, but overall. And I don't want to hold any one church or one group responsible for these youth suicide rates, but I do want us to recognize that this is a real problem, and that we have the power to maybe make some changes for these people so that they stop. And I told him that I would be happy to be part of any outreach programs that maybe we could do, and I mentioned Howard Anderson's program, and he was on board with something similar. And so now every second Sunday of the month in the East Long Beach Stake, we have a outreach group to LGBTQ Mormons who meet at a member's home. And we have a family home meeting the third Sunday of every month for allies of LGBTQ people. We had to start splitting it up because we've got so many people attending, which is a great thing. And, again, the rules there are just, we need to be respectful. And President Fersch has given both Mike and I quite a bit of latitude in how we discuss the issues at hand, and being able to listen to people who attend and understand their issues. It's critical. It's absolutely critical that we provide that safe space for these people to be able to communicate their own background and their own issues.
Do you worry these are going to get shut down? Like, I forgot his name, Howard Anderson, I think.
I do. So initially, especially, I did, and I vocalized my concerns with President Fersch because my concern wasn't even so much that we're starting these, but what happens when they get closed down. Because in my mind, they would get closed down. They will get closed down. It's a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. And can we gain the traction we need before they get closed down to do any good? And President Fersch said, he said, well, if we don't hold them on church property, then, and we do these at members' homes, then, there's less of a chance of that happening. We talked about ways of being able to kind of mitigate that. I think he was more concerned about me and how I felt about it than actually having them closed down. I think he was trying to get me to understand that some things have changed. And I didn't see that at the time. And he's been working on this for a very long time. He's been preparing this stake, the leaders in the stake and the membership in the stake. He's been preparing them for a lot of things. He's had outreach programs to the Black communities and the Black churches, and for joint congregations. He's created these incredible outreach programs for people on Skid Row, where they're giving away hundreds and hundreds of backpacks full of food and things that they need. He is not a one-issue kind of guy. And his response to everything I ever said and any concern I ever said was, as far as, are you worried about what they might do to your membership, or what they would say, or how you would, how they would respond, either from church offices or wherever? He would say, you know what, I am going to do what I believe is Christ wants me to do. I'm going to follow Christ, and that's important to me. I'm going to focus on that. So I feel like that I don't feel like he was ever out of turn in how he represented the Mormon Church, or how he represented his stake, or his calling. I feel like he was helping me to understand that, don't worry, Scott, don't worry, we'll do this. We'll get there, and we'll make this happen somehow. And and if it all, comes crashing down, we'll find another way. So, to help them, in some other way. But his main concern was just making sure that, these people were cared for. So yes, I did have a very large amount of concern with those being closed down, because I saw the damage that was caused from the last one.
In my conversations with President Fersch, I think he's received some cover, and I'll let him speak about that. He can answer that question. That I think he feels like from his running this up the flagpole and helping to name it the way it was named, that he did get he feels pretty confident. And I know other stakes now that are consulting and looking at what the Long Beach East stake is doing and saying, well, we can do that. And so one of my hopes is what you're doing is scalable. And
me too.
And the church is at a point where we're recognizing, for me, it all shifted when I quit thinking of LGBTQ people as an outside threat to our faith or me, and looked at them as our own people. You're our own people, Scott. So we have a responsibility to you. You're not an other group. You're our family. And so if you go down that road, then you say, what are my baptism responsibility, or if I'm a leader, what are my stewardship responsibilities? So to me, what is going on there is consistent with our doctrine. And I think we're mature enough to be able to do this. And I hope it's the beginning of just this being more of this happening.
I hope so too. I really hope so too.
But rightly so. I like the way he is thinking about you, recognizing your hopes have been crushed, and you've walked in this space, and you've seen this pattern over and over again. So rightly so, you would be guarded just to protect yourself emotionally.
Yeah.
As we're talking about your PTSD throughout kind of this podcast. So yeah, keep sharing more of your story.
So yeah, I think that what was really positive, like you say, the area president was also on board. He's done nothing in the closet. He has always been very open about what he's doing as far as these outreach programs go, and they have all been authorized by people over him in area presidencies, as well as the Elder Weatherford Clayton, who was in attendance, general authority in attendance of the state conference that I spoke at, was also very much aware of this. So
we just ought to stop there. I hope what our listeners heard is the January stake conference he invited you to, you weren't able to attend, but the very next stake conference in the stake, which I think was in June, with the visiting general authority or area authority 70, he asked you to speak at stake conference, the Sunday session, the Saturday night session?
The Saturday night session.
Saturday night session with Elder Weatherford Clayton.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's later in your story, if you want to talk about that now.
Well, I think that it was terrifying.
How long in advance did he ask you to speak in stake conference? Like a month, a week?
So I knew about it a couple of months in advance. President Fersch had mentioned that he would like to have me speak, and he had to get it cleared through Elder Weatherford Clayton. Once it was cleared, then I was terrified, and I was lucky enough to let President Fersch read kind of one of my drafts to help me identify where I really needed to focus, because 10 minutes is not long, and getting a focal point is important. He knew his congregation. He knew how much they had been given up until that point, and he knew how much he wanted to make them feel uncomfortable. He's very much in tune with these congregants, and he knows them, and he supports them, and he wants them to do better, and he wants to be part of that change. And I just really respect that. I really, truly respect that. There were some things he would say, maybe back off on that a bit. Let's leave that for a leadership conference, which I did actually be part of. I taught at a stake leadership conference later, and I think that he was just so helpful in helping me identify what needed to be done without compromising my own truth and without compromising myself. And it was so much appreciated. And I think that you know, I it's leaders like that where I just know, and people like that in the church where I know they're guided by the Spirit. I know it. I feel it. You can't question it. When I hear your own podcasts, I know you're working with the Spirit. There is something that talks to you, that tells me that this is, this is really sincere, and it's very much confirmed by the Spirit in my own body. So I think that, he was really, Weatherford Clayton, Elder Clayton was very supportive after my talk and very warm. And, I had some things to say, and that were not necessarily in line with what the church normally teaches in a way. I won't say that I said anything that was directly contrary, but that my personal revelation was important. And he did nothing to mitigate that or change that, which I really appreciated. In fact, his ending comment to his own talk was,
"This is Elder Clayton's talk."
Elder Clayton, that evening, was that he hoped that we all could live our authentic lives as followers of Christ.
It's a great comment.
It was a great comment. It was a wonderful comment, and I felt like I was heard.
Boy, I felt like I was heard. Something that's, I think, helpful. I'm asked to speak at times about this topic, which is fine, but it's better if LGBTQ people speak. And that's something sometimes I'm criticized, rightly so, when I'm invited to speak, and LGBTQ would say, well, they need to hear our stories. And I absolutely agree. And my heart changed mostly not by listening to straight people tell me about LGBTQ people. It was listening to the gay men in my ward. That's where it all started. So when I heard Mike Secrist talk in your stake conference, then if I'd been there for years, that's how hearts change. That's why I'm honored to do this podcast, to bring your story to life, because that's how hearts change, is listening to you and listening to the Spirit as you talk and share your journey. And so I'm so glad that President Fersch is doing that. And maybe other local leaders, you have to start with an ally in a pragmatic way just to start the discussion going. And an ally maybe feels really safe. Hopefully we can just kind of get right to having LGBTQ people tell their stories and what's happening in your stake as stake members, being able to tell your journey. And as a side note, Elder Weatherford Clayton delivered our first daughter when we lived in California at Hoag Hospital way back 27 years ago. So he was really good OB, and we were really slow that night. And he was up all night with us. And so I hope I don't know if he's ever caught up on his sleep from his practice, but it's wonderful what he's doing now. So keep sharing your story, Scott.
So after I delivered my baby, he was very gracious, and I think that, to your point, I would also say that other leaders who are listening to this, don't worry about what you know and what you don't know. If you take on an ally who is LGBTQ, I can almost guarantee they'll know so much more than you. Listen to what they have to say, follow it up with what the church's policies currently are, and I'm sure you'll find that there's a lot of consistency there. So use them as your own resource to better identify how you can minister to the LGBTQ community in your congregations. But I want to talk just a little bit, if I may. There's this time where I went to a group called Affirmation, and it was originally created in Los Angeles. Now it's worldwide, but it was very. It was created independently by gay, lesbian Mormons who were feeling like they needed some kind of support. And so it was all done before the age of internet and everything. And it wasn't in any way, shape, or form being supported by the Mormon Church, but they had formed this group, and we were meeting monthly, and we had some really dear people who were attending it who had lost a son to AIDS, and they were Joan and Bill Atkinson. And I went to one of these meetings back when I was trying to identify whether or not I could stay active. And I had mentioned this incident where I was in the foyer, and I heard these two kids yelling at each other. And one of them just yelled out the word fag. And nobody reacted within the foyer. And I was just, my heart kind of sank. And I thought, wow, not a single person here reacted to that. And so I went to the Affirmation meeting that night, and I just said, well, I don't know if I can keep going. I just don't know if I can do this. And Sister Atkinson, she had this really amazing energy, and she said, oh, you know what? That's just a teachable moment. That's when I just go up to them and I can say, we don't use that word. And that word is a really bad word. We never use that word because it means something really bad about people who are so good. And she just went on and about how this was such a teachable moment. And I looked at her in awe, and I just thought, wow, I just wish I could be more like Sister Atkinson. I wish I could be more like Joan. Because I really wanted to be able to take all of this negative energy coming at me at the time with Prop 22 and to be able to say, no, these are teaching moments every single time. And I didn't feel strong enough to be able to do that at the time. But I recognize her voice in my head now, and she has, passed last year, but I hear her voice in my head still. And I think it's important for us as members within the church to recognize that no matter what the issue is, there is very rarely a time where we see if we were to, draw out a Gantt chart, that is a continuous upward rise without little defaults and little slips along the way. That there are going to be crevices, there are going to be dips in how we progress. And I think that in order for us to really see the big picture and how we move forward as a church and as individuals of followers of Christ, that we recognize that both within ourselves and within other people, there will be dips. And we empower ourselves so much more if we look at those dips as teaching moments, as a way to be able to say, oh, you know what? I don't believe that. I don't agree with that, because these people, aren't that way. These people don't do what you just said. They're not a general category. They're individuals, and we don't look at them, as a general category any more than we would, say, straight people. And I think that it's just a very powerful way for me to be able to take that kind of control and say, no, I'm going to make this my teaching moment. I'm going to help people understand. So I guess just to kind of follow that up, there's a few points that I just wanted to make with what I've seen in the past and my experience that I feel like can be maybe these teachable moments for other people.
Good.
And one of them is an occasion where I was at the Salt Lake airport and I was trying to get back to LA. And the next thing I know, these flight attendants come up to me. I was on standby for first class. And these flight attendants come up to me and they say, "Oh, we put you together." And I said, "Oh, together." And they said, "With Donnie." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll take a first class upgrade no matter what, no matter how it comes." So they apparently thought I was traveling with Donnie Osmond. And I found myself in the seat next to him. And while we've never had, we've had these family occasions, I've never had a personal one-on-one with him. And here we had this nice long flight. And I first of all want to say how much I respect the Osmond family. They have given me, and I did tell them this, they've given me no reason to be embarrassed by them. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. They have really, they have done amazing things for the Mormon Church and getting people converted. I saw so many people that heard about Mormonism just because of them in Europe and in general. But I was sitting here speaking with Donnie Osmond, and I said, "Well, how do I even start this conversation?" I didn't want to start out with, "I'm a little bit country, I'm a little bit homosexual."
What year is this roughly? This flight?
This was in it was in 2003.
So this is close. Okay, 2003. Okay.
Yeah. I believe it was 2003. He was doing the $1 Million Pyramid, and he was flying back and forth, and as a host. And I said, "Well, I really want to just thank you for but he admitted right off the bat that he said, 'Oh, you must have been horribly teased.'" And I just thought, yeah, he recognized that was quite a burden to grow up with.
This is after you told him you were gay. So
No, this is after I told him I said, "Well, I don't know if you recognize me or anything, but I'm Scott Osmond, and I'm a cousin of yours." And so, he said, "Oh yeah, well, you must have been really, that must have been hard for you growing up." And this was before I told him I was gay. I think that was, very kind of him to recognize that. And because, I was very commonly teased for that. And so I spoke to him a little bit about how I was also, teased for also being gay, and that, that was something that I was dealing with. And he, in a kind of a roundabout way, he started talking about how, being around gay people was very common for him in his industry, and that, Paul Lynn, hello, he was on his show, and that was no secret to anybody watching. But I think that he, mentioned that, that was not an issue for him. But he continued to go on and speak about hypothesizing about the theology that what it meant to be gay within the Mormon theology. And he said that, maybe in his opinion that it could be that we were, administering angels. And I recognized that he was trying to find a place for me, which, in a way was very kind, and that he didn't mean it in a mean way. But at the same time, it made me feel less than.
Right.
That I am, I guess, because I'm gay, I'm going to be serving other people for the rest of my life, or cutting their hair or whatever. And I just felt like, that was something that I didn't probably need to hear. And I don't want it to be a criticism of him personally. I just want to use this as a teaching experience, because I want to say, anyone who wants to hypothesize about our place in the afterlife and where we fit in is just an absolute guess. We don't know. And so let's leave it at that. and let's not make anyone feel less than. Let's not try and fit them into a space they don't belong. God will work this out. He will work this out. And I know I have a place, and I know I'll be happy. If I do what I need to do, I know He will reward me with my own place. And I don't need anybody to tell me that that will be anything less than what they get. So
I like that. I did a podcast with a BYU professor, and this came up, and I said, "What advice?" And he says, "I have no advice."
it's a good answer.
And he said, "I have no idea, how LGBTQ people." He was so humble, and he was so bright, and he's used to having an answer because he's a great, religious professor. But I just thought that was such a thoughtful answer to say, "I don't know." And so I think we're going to be pretty certain sometimes, but I think that can add to people's burdens. So that's great advice, Scott.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And so, yeah, I think that in a world of the LGBTQ community where you're constantly trying to prove your worth, and you're filled with overachievers because they are constantly trying to say, I'm worthy of this, I'm worthy of recognition, I'm worthy of all these other things. Just because I don't have a family, I'm still worthy of going home at the same time as all these other employees who go home at the same time to their families. I am worth the same thing. We are constantly trying to, in small ways, in large ways, in very substantial ways, prove that we have worth that is similar to anyone who is not in the same situation. So I just would humbly ask that people consider that when you're trying to think about those kinds of hypotheses. And I think that places like affirmation can be a great place for people to go to get more information and be around other people who are LGBTQ as well. Just recognize that there is a history there where there was a large number of people who felt excluded once there became more church affiliation within affirmation. And there is a distrust there. And so these are still people who are very hurt and don't feel like the church has taken steps that they need to make them feel welcome into groups like affirmation anymore. And even blogs that were written about Howard Anderson's group were removed when that happened. So there is a distrust, but I want everyone to recognize that we all have some learning to do. We all have some healing to do on both sides. And we all need to trust each other a little bit. That, if we're going to move forward as a community and at large, we do have to show a little bit of trust. And if it's your choice not to do that, I respect that. I completely 100% respect that. I respect your experiences, and I respect your pain. But I would suggest that that's something that you consider going forward. And I would also suggest that when we talk about things like the gay lifestyle, and that it perpetuates poor and risky behavior with homosexuality, and that we're using these blanket terms, there is no gay lifestyle. I can promise you that. We are all different. We are all different. We're snowflakes. Every one of us is different. I do not do hair. I cannot, do interior design to save my life, but I have my strengths and weaknesses in different places, and we all do. I think that that's important for people to recognize. And we also recognize that because in the past, just in a general way, society has viewed homosexuality as a sexual deviancy. And there has been a strong lack of familial support, and lack of spiritual and religious support, and lack of social support and civic and legal support. How would you, if you were in this situation, react to the pressure this lack would cause? Where would you go for support? And if you were labeled as opposite sex attracted, what would you do to be around others who are also opposite sex attracted as a minority? Would you move to these bigger cities? Would you look for people around you who are in the same situation? Would you self-medicate? Would you subscribe to controversial treatments to maybe mitigate the emotional pain and damage? Would you maybe even engage in risky behaviors just to make the pain go away for a little while? I think that it's important for us to recognize that this isn't self-inflicted. This isn't because we're gay or LGBTQ. This is because there has been a strong lack of support. And when there is that much support withdrawn from people, then people tend to act out in different ways. And so I hope that nobody ever looks at this community as just a simple group of sexual deviants, because we are so much more than that. And as we see the social support enlarging, we see those familial bonds increasing. We see that people are thriving in their lives and becoming productive and helpful citizens all around the world. So we see what support can do, and we see what lack of support can do. And I also want to say that there is probably no end to what you would go to if you were told that you would not get the full blessings in this life or the next life if you did not marry someone of your same sex, if that was the case, that you had to marry your same sex. And when you put yourself in that situation, you start to understand what it feels like for a gay person within the Mormon Church, what they're being asked to do or what they have been asked to do. And currently, it's you start to understand why it's so difficult for everyone to do that. There have been some real watershed moments in my life where the passage of gay marriage in Utah happened on December 20th, 2013. I flew in that same day for Christmas, and my sister and I went down to the city county building. I wanted to see what was going on. They were having a rally, and I was first of all so surprised to see that there were no protesters, not one that I could physically see. And I think whether that's because everyone was still baking cookies, I don't know, and running around for Christmas, but I was grateful for that. It made me, it was a time in my life I never would have imagined. I didn't see that ever happening in my lifetime. And I'm so grateful for it. And we were interviewed on the news, on Channel 2 News, and it was just this amazing moment in my life. And I can't say what kind of doors those open for me emotionally, to say that it's okay. It's okay for me to be who I am. So this is another change where I'm okay to be who I am. I'm really lucky to live in this time and space. And I also want to address one other thing with regard to mixed orientation marriages. I want to make sure everyone understands that I am even though the church doesn't currently subscribe to a gay person marrying a straight person currently, I support those marriages that have been entered into and may be entered into in the future. There's been a lot of times where I've seen those fail, but the ones that I've seen succeed, where both partners know what's going on, they're fully aware, they're communicative, they have families that they love, They wouldn't change it for any way, shape, or form. It is critical and crucial that we as a gay community, LGBTQ community, accept those people as much as anyone else. That is their truth. They have an absolute right to their truth, and we have no business telling them that they are not being authentic or their truth selves. They are being their truth self. I can guarantee that. I have been very much a part of their lives, and I am very happy for them, and we owe them that kind of support. So
I agree with that, and I didn't know that till I talked to people in mixed orientation marriages, and they've, as you may know, we've done a couple podcasts, and they're beautiful love stories.
They are.
And I love the way you frame that out, and I love your maturity in the LGBTQ space, where you can honor other LGBTQ people as they choose their own path, and that's not activating to you. It may have been at one time, but I think that's a great sign of your maturity in the space you're walking, to honor everybody's stories within that space. And that's great, Scott. So that's very well said.
Thank you so much. So I just want to leave you with some ways that you can help, that I believe members can help today, and going forward. I want to leave everyone on this positive note, as you mentioned at the beginning, with some action items that if they want change to happen, this is how I envision it happening, for that they can make a real difference. First of all, I want them to be able to find a way to acquaint themselves with the church's current position on sexual identity and orientation. It's critical. If you don't know what LGBTQ means, find out. It's lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, transgender, Q for questioning or queer. And then there's also 2 more letters, intersex and asexual. Please familiarize yourselves with those terms, because they're not going away. They are part of this community's identity, and it's how they identify themselves. And if you don't know what to call somebody, ask them what they want to be called, and I promise they won't be offended. So it's also critical that we all come to the understanding that sexual identity is not chosen. Full stop. It is assigned, and there may be questions, and people may question their sexual identity as they go along in life, and they may question what they do with that sexuality and how they live their lives with it. But it is not a chosen item, and that is the current church's stance. And I hope that all members will closely associate themselves with that policy change. And pray and get personal confirmation if you need it, because this is an absolute truth. I truly believe it. The more I listen to everybody's story, from when I first started coming out to now, and through your podcast as well, it's enforced over and over and over again. This is not a choice. It's not a choice. It's not a choice. What you do with it is a choice. Your orientation is not. And so also, I will say one more time, active listening, absolutely essential. You must be willing to offer to listen to the story of these groups of people, and you can make a change in someone's life today by finding someone who is either a member of your congregation or outside of your congregation, and asking them if you could listen to their story and listen to them. Or you can listen to some more of the podcasts from Richard Osler and Live, Learn, Love. And there's so many good ones here, so many good ones. So you can be proactive with that. I would also say that you can talk to your bishop and stake leaders, as we've talked about before, to form outreach groups for LGBTQ members and their allies. And so you can offer your home as a place for these meetings, and you can feel free to contact me, or I hope Richard as well, if you would like more information as to how we've set those up in our own stake, so that you can come to your own leaders and ask them for permission to do something similar. I will tell you, these are very spiritual meetings. They are very enlightening, and they will probably, I hope, change your life. They definitely have changed mine. I would also say, don't push someone to come out of the closet who you think may be LGBTQ. This is a personal decision they need to make, and you have no business in it without them opening up to you first. And if they open up to you, is a huge amount of trust that goes into that. Keep their confidence at all costs. Do not go talking to anybody else about these things that they've entrusted you with in their care. That is absolute critical. And make them feel safe and make them feel like they're understood. So
I like that. I think sometimes when we are trusted with information, we use that to elevate ourselves, that we are kind of in the know of a situation or have a key piece of information as a way to elevate ourselves. And maybe it's our pride sinking in. So I think that's another way to make sure we don't do what you're asking us not to do, is we can't share that information.
No, not unless you're specifically told to.
And I think we know that when someone opens up us with confidential information they're not supposed to share, what kind of message does that send to me about that person? I'm not going to open up to that person.
Yeah.
If they're just sharing with me stuff that is confidential and was asked not to be shared.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when we consider the position that the LGBTQ members are in, where we're really not given a clear eternal plan, which makes us question where we're at within the plan to begin with. That we are, sometimes hypothesized about that, and then sometimes we also are. We are at the mercy of people's own opinions and biases. That sometimes that can be a very lonely existence. We're being asked currently essentially to exclude us from meaningful relationships, romantic relationships, and that we lock off our hearts, and that we don't experience all kinds of love, and that we don't experience families of our own, and that we take that all in faith, that somehow that will bring us our greatest amount of happiness. It's a lot that this church is asking our LGBTQ members. It really is. And so I'm not saying that they don't have the authority to do that or the right. I'm just saying, take that into consideration when you're listening to these people. Consider what that would mean to you if you were being asked to do the same thing, and see how easy that would be for you to implement in your life. And in so doing, I would hope that you would be and remain open to personal revelation of the individual, that if they receive confirmation in their own personal revelation to live their life a specific way, whether that be with another man or another woman, or whether they do that singly alone or in a mixed orientation marriage, that you respect their own personal revelation, and that you support them and you celebrate their life the way that they deserve, and with the love and the care that they deserve. So yeah, I think that in my my own path, I find forgiveness to be key. I want to speak to the LGBTQ community for a moment and just say that forgiveness is important. We've been hurt. We've been minimalized. But we need to recognize that it's not where you begin, it's where you end that's important. We need to let go of some of these hurts and some of these pains. We need to give people another chance when they're asking for it and when they want it. And I think that will help us. I think that will help us and them. So I hope that we'll see a lot of forgiveness in the future. And I also hope that we'll see that there will be a lot of successful building of these relationships and active listening because of it. The respect is important. I think that avoiding using examples from the pulpit, saying brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so is doing this or that or the other with their life because they're LGBTQ is a very dangerous position to be in as a leader and as that person. It puts a lot of weight on them. What if they fail? And, we don't, again, we're all snowflakes. So trying to pigeonhole someone into one way of living and one frame of thinking just doesn't seem right. So I hope that leaders will avoid doing that. And in being open to personal revelation, I hope that you'll consider that as controversial as the LGBTQ issues are, that the Book of Mormon doesn't recite one single verse about homosexuality. Not one single one. It's our most perfect book of scripture in the Mormon Church, yet not one single scripture mentions it. How could it be this controversial and this problematic and we not have some guidance there? And my heart tells me that there's a reason for this. It tells me that there is possibly, we need to use the Spirit to guide us, that we can't be told about everything in every way, and that we need to use the Spirit to guide us in leading us down the road to a path of true, showing Christ's true love, and that we need to make exceptions to the rules that we have in our own minds. There was an exception where Nephi was slaying Laban and wondered why he was being commanded to slay Laban. He didn't understand it, but he recognized the Spirit was telling him to do this through personal revelation. Please be open to that. Please, please, please be open to revelation. And within the Article of Faith, the 13th Article of Faith, I hold true to my heart a lot of things where it says there, if there's anything virtuous, lovely, or of good report or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. And in my own existence, I found those in some very non-conventional ways. My friends, my family, they all laugh, but I find RuPaul to be incredibly inspiring and very helpful in my strengths of looking at my own weaknesses and strengths. And one of her quotes is, "It's none of my business what you think of me." And I want you to think about what that means for you, and that it's not necessarily something that's coming at you, but maybe something that you can avoid. Because if you say, "It's none of my business what you think of me, so please don't hurt me," it means something very real. And it allows us to open up, and it allows us to identify that we're all humans and we can all be hurt. We all want to hope that, we're strong enough that those things don't hurt us in the end, but we are all human and we all bleed. So, I want to close Richard, I know it's gone on a long time. I'm so sorry if it's gone on too long, but I want to close with my testimony. These things are hard. They're hard for everyone. And I can testify today that I know God loves me for who I am as a gay man. I testify God wants me to be happy and have a fulfilling life in this life and the hereafter. I testify that God wants me to find love and compassion and companionship, and that he is okay if I find it with another man. I testify that the Spirit of God exists in all relationships. It can be in all relationships, and whether they're in gay families, mixed orientation marriages, single parent families, etc. And I believe that Jesus is my personal Savior and Redeemer. I testify that the atonement of Christ was never meant to fix me from being gay, but to fight that monster in my head and tell me that I am not less than, that I am loved as a gay man. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned. I'm grateful for the people who have so lovingly gotten me here, because this did not happen alone. And I'm so grateful for my family and my friends who support me and celebrate me today. We talked about a little bit before the discussion about my involvement in the Mormon Church. I can only tell you that currently it's like a fire. I get close to the Mormon Church and I feel the warmth and I feel the love, but I'm also very intimately familiar with the burn when you get too close. And so because of PTSD issues and things, I have to be careful about how much I involve myself. But I never want anyone to take that personally. Never. I want people to understand it for what it is. I appreciate their love and their inclusion and their invitations. I also hope they can respect where my limits have to lie. And that I appreciate everything that everyone has done to make me feel more comfortable in the Long Beach East Stake especially. I hope everybody gets this chance. I wish it on everyone who has gone through any LGBTQ experience, because it really has been a very special experience. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm so grateful for you, Richard Osler. Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
This has been a really moving podcast, Scott. I've had tears in my eyes, and I think our listeners have had tears in their eyes. And I just sense, somebody across the table with great spiritual maturity, emotional maturity that's been stretched and torn and bruised. And we're glad you're alive. I'm glad that and I see all the contributions you're giving to society in all the different ways you're serving. I'm grateful for what's going on Long Beach East Stake. I do think about that stake a lot, and I think we're at a time in our church where we can scale stuff like that. I had a really tender experience with a stake president that he didn't know about the Long Beach East Stake, but he just recognized that he has members that are LGBTQ and feels the mantle of wanting to minister to them. He asked me for a priesthood blessing, that he would know how to do this in his stake, because he just felt called. And he knows it's complicated. And he knows, but he feels the mantle of the responsibility to his own people that are LGBTQ, and recognize we have to do what President Ballard said, we have to do better than we have in the past until all feel a spiritual home. And I think that's recognizing, as you're pointing out very accurately, some of the things we've done in the past that have not been helpful. And I think we learn from the past. and it helps us do better. And you have this tone, Scott, that's so kind, even in the opposite of the balm of Gilead, and being so loving to people that should have been the safest people for you. Your mom always was, but where a local leader wasn't able to fully do what he needed to do. And you just show love and kindness and understanding. And, I think of Preach My Gospel, chapter 6, and spirit and the Christ-like attributes. We have a son that just left, and you have those with you, Scott, and you've been refined in a wonderful, difficult way. But on behalf of all our listeners, we love you. We're glad you're alive. Thank you for the things you're sharing us. What's the best way for people to find you? I know you're on Facebook at Scott Osmond. Is that the best way to message you on Facebook, or do you want to give out any other contact information?
Sure. You can also reach me at Scott Osmond, SCOTTOSMOND at MSN.com.
Okay. Thank you, Scott Osmond. Thank you, President Fersch, Michael Secrist, all the I forgot the wonderful lady that messaged me about you too. There's a lot of people to thank in this podcast for what's going on, and all the good people trying to do better. So those of you that are part of the Long Beach East Stake and sister stakes around there supporting what's going on, pray for your continued success, and that more and more people feel the balm of Gilead for what you're accomplishing. And thank our listeners for joining us on an episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.